Okay, so we're here. I decided again because of Moshe Wolfson, just passed away. His funeral was yesterday, so I started looking through some of his Torah that relates to this week's Parsha, to Kalev ben Yefuneh, but it also goes back, especially he had an intense connection to Eretz Yisrael. They brought out a sefer in English. I forget what it's called. He wrote about the ruchnistic nature of so many places in Eretz Yisrael. For years and years, he would come here every summer. And so he wrote a very beautiful mimer about Hebron and Maras HaMachpelah. So we're going to try to see a bit of both, because Kalev ben Yefuneh, as we know, ran to Hebron, to Maras HaMachpelah, to daven, when he was afraid of the influence of the Meraglim. So let's start off just with Or Chaim HaKadosh, with a famous question he asked. So, thank you. A famous question he asked about Hashem's praise to Kalev. Okay, we all know the layout of the Meraglim. There were 12 Meraglim. 10 of them were Ha'eda, Hara, Hazos. Right? They spoke ill about Eretz Yisrael and again, even though in the Sifrei Musar and Chassidus you find that they weren't just bums, so to speak. Obviously, Kulam Anoshim, Rosh B'nai Yisrael, they were chosen, they were special. Their intentions, so to speak, were good, and there are all sorts of theories as to where things went wrong. Now, Hashem says, after saying that these people are not going to go into Eretz Yisrael, he says, Va'avdi Kalev, my servant Kalev, Ekev hoysel ruach acheres imo, because he had a different spirit with him, Vayamale acharai, and he fully, so to speak, followed me in a full way. He will bring him to that place. I will bring him to that place that he went, and his children will inherit it. So Rashi explains, the Ruach Acheres, Rashi explains, is what he did back when he quieted down the people. Right? A little trick in public speaking. It said, Vayahas Kalev esaom el Moshe. Kalev quieted them down. What's it mean, El Moshe? That he convinced the people that he was with them, right? And he says, quiet, this is all, ben Amram, is this the only thing Moshe Rabbeinu did to us? And they thought he was going to complain more about Moshe Rabbeinu. And he said, Kara lanu asayom, right? Hoid lanu asamon, he split the sea, brought us the money, did all these good things. So that is, he says, the idea of Shtei ruchos. He had two spirits in him. Achad bapeh ve'achad balev. He was able to use his power of speaking with the mouth to achieve his purposes, to fight against the Meraglim, even though his heart was always totally loyal. And he says, this is why it says in Sefer Yoshua, okay, in Yoshua we find Kalev speaking to Yoshua, explaining why he wanted to get Hebron, right, as his inheritance. He said it was promised him, and he recaps a little bit his argument with the Meraglim. He said, and I responded to them as was in my heart, but not with what was in my mouth. Okay, so that's what he says, and therefore, Vayamale acharai, Hashem says, Mila es libo acharai. He filled his heart to go after me. Okay? He followed me with a full heart. That's what we have from Rashi. The Or Chaim HaKadosh asks, he says, wait a second, what happened to Yeshua? In other words, Yeshua also didn't participate in the Chet Meraglim. Yeshua also said, Tova ha'aretz ma'od ma'od. And Kalev is getting this wonderful award ceremony, and Yeshua isn't called up to the stage. Nothing. Right? He says, Tzarech ladas, lama lo hizker la Kalev v'lo Yoshua. Also, he says, what do these phrases mean? Ruach acheres imo, this other spirit that was with him, and vayamale acharai, and this idea of following me in this full manner. So he says like this, Kalev gets this unique title, Avdi Kalev. Okay? To be called Eved Hashem is a very high title. Moshe Rabbeinu gets that title. Now he says he gets that title Ekev Asher Hoysel Ruach Acheres Imo, because he had another spirit with him. What does that other spirit mean? It says like this: Yoshua got this very interesting bracha from Moshe Rabbeinu at the beginning. Vayikra Moshe Loshea bin Nun Yehoshua. He changed his name. And Chazal said his intention with that name change was, Ko Yoshiacha me'atzas Meraglim. May Hashem save you from the plans of the Meraglim. Endless questions about this in the Mefarshim. If Moshe Rabbeinu knew it was going to go bad, right, what was there? Why didn't he daven for all of them? Why didn't he daven at least for Kalev? Why only Yoshua? What's going on there? Again, it's something to look into for homework. But what we do find, he says, Tfilas Moshe hitzilato miyetzaharo mikochosav. He said Moshe Rabbeinu basically immunized Yoshua to any problems of Meraglim. Right? That name change was an essential change in Yoshua's essence, so the Meraglim could say anything they wanted, just bounced right off Yoshua. Nothing. He had no Yetzer Hara to be drawn to them. But Masha'en ken Kalev. Kalev nichnas begeder sakonas hayetzer hara. Kalev got into the danger zone of the Yetzer Hara. Vatochel ruach ro'o lefa'amo. And this ruach acheres was a evil spirit that was pushing in him. He was drawn to the argument of the Meraglim. He was attracted by what they said and what they were doing. Va'afal pichen vayemale acharai. But nonetheless, he followed me wholeheartedly. He says, this is something we have to realize throughout our lives. He says a person has two advisors, two yoatzim, yoetz ra and yoetz tov, right? And he says, if you resist the yoetz ra, that bad counsel that's pushing you one way, and you follow Hashem, so then you're in reward. Like Chazal said, Misha ba'aver liyodo v'nitzol mimeno. If a person is in a situation when he has the ability and the desire to do an avera, and he doesn't do it, nosin lo schar ka'osa mitzvah. He gets reward as if he did a mitzvah, even though he was totally passive. Right? He's getting reward for what he didn't do. Now, obviously, it has to be what's called ba'aver liyodo. In other words, I can't just say, I'm getting so many mitzvahs now, I'm not worshiping idols, I'm not eating meat and milk, I'm not, all these kind of things. If I was really hungry and there was a cheeseburger in front of me and I resisted it, then I get the reward. So that was what Kalev got. Ze eno b'Yoshua. Yoshua doesn't get that reward. Lo haisa ruach acheres imo, la'tosu miderech haseichel. He didn't have any opposing force arguing, trying to push him away from the path of seichel. And this is why, right, Kalev got this title of Eved Hashem, just like Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, and therefore he also earned Ha'aretz HaShabuah to get the ownership of Hebron. Why? Because he went there, Chazal say Maseches Sota, Nispalel al Atzmo. He went to daven for himself. He felt that he was in trouble. He felt that he was weakening. And he went there to daven, and therefore, right, he not only will enter Eretz Yisrael, but he will receive that as his inheritance. Okay, so this is the Rachaim HaKadosh, which is very important, right? There's a great Talmud Chacham here in Yerushalayim, one of the old Breslovers of Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter. And I heard once Rav Fishel Shechter, who's not related to him, but he's a very popular speaker in English, right? So he asked Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter in a visit to Eretz Yisrael, said, I speak a lot publicly in America and such. What do you think I should tell people? He said, tell them that it's okay to have a Yetzer Hara. Meaning having a Yetzer Hara doesn't make you bad. That makes you, right? That is part and parcel of us. Okay, so therefore, the trick is to be able to overcome it like Kalev did. Now, Rav Wolfson adds another level to this. He says, right, Vayemali libo acharai. It's a strange expression. What is this idea of making the heart whole? He made his heart whole after me. Now in Shema, we know that we say, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. Levavcha is a strange form of the word. It should be libcha, your heart. Levavcha, b'shnei yitzarecha, Chazal say. With both of your yitzarim. Okay? Now, he says that means to serve Hashem with the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. Now it's interesting, again, I am mathematically challenged, so in gematrias I just take on faith. But it's interesting. Rav Shimon Spitzer, I'm friendly with a great speaker also, he's a nephew of Rav Wolfson, and he spoke a little bit about his uncle. He said, the gematrias you find in his sefer, it wasn't like somebody trying to come up with gematrias for a Sheva Brachas. Okay, the chassan is this, and the kal is that, now we get something. He said he just saw these things springing out at him just from his purity and his involvement in Torah. So he says, if you wrote the word levav, with the miloi, what's called. So that means you write it lamed, which is lamed mem dalet, beis, which is beis yud tov, right? And again, beis yud tov. That comes out to the gematria, yetzer tov v'yetzer hara. Okay, and he says, and it's meduyak, in other words, in the Gemara in Brachos, where it says you serve Hashem, it says b'yetzer tov, without the hay, and yetzer hara, with the hay. So he says that's what makes the exact sum, and that's exactly the way it's written in the Gemara. Okay, now, what does it mean serving Hashem with the Yetzer Hara? Right? We look at that in Shema. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean resisting the Yetzer Hara. It actually means utilizing the powers that are associated with the Yetzer Hara for Avodas Hashem. He says a person can use jealousy for what's called kinas sofrim. For this jealousy, not so much of a person, but of accomplishments, of seeing a person who fulfills their potential and your desire to fulfill your potential. Right? Kavod, right? There's an idea of having vayigba libo b'darchei Hashem, to be proud of your Judaism, proud of the fact you have there are ways to use these things, and that a person has to use. Right? He says you can't even explain the pasuk in Ve'era, where Moshe Rabbeinu told Paro, right? You got to let us go out into the midbar to do our sacrifices. Ki to'avas Mitzrayim nizbach l'Hashem Elokeinu. So the pshat is that the sheep that were revered by the Egyptians, right? So that, he says, that's what we're going to be shechting. You don't want us to do that in Mitzrayim. But he says Mitzrayim was the seat of all Tumah and Ra. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, do you know what? All of the Tumah, all of the spiritual negativity that's here in Mitzrayim, nizbach l'Hashem Elokeinu. We're going to bring that as a korban to Hashem. Okay, so this. Now on the opposite side, he says, Rishoim take even their Yetzer HaTov and subjugate it to Ra. You can take something like kindness and use it in ways which are Ra. You can take giving to someone and use it in ways which are Ra. Right, so all these things can be twisted. Now, Kalev served Hashem with his Yetzer Hara. And that's why it says there in Yoshua, Kasherim Livavi, right, meaning that I took the idea of sheker, of falsehood, and here I used it to fight against Hashem Yisbarach. Falsehood is something very bad. But here in his deception with the Meraglim, to make them think he was with them, and then turn it around, so then it says, Vayimale Achrai, that's why Rashi says, Milo Libo, the full heart, Levav, Yetzer HaTov, and Yetzer Hara. That was the praise of him. Now here I just want to mention, I heard in a shir, Vincent Twersky from Milwaukee, I listen to him sometimes, he's mentioned this a few times. There's an old sefer called Orach L'Chaim. He was a Talmud of the Maggid of Mesrich, and he brings this fascinating idea, which you really got to develop from the Maggid of Mesrich. The Gemara Maseches Kiddushin says, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Barasi Yetzer Hara, I created a Yetzer Hara, Barasi lo Torah Tavlin, and I created for him, or for it, the Torah as a tavlin, which in its most simple explanation is a spice. Okay, now he says, wait a second, how does that mashal work? How does that comparison work? If we say, I created the Yetzer Hara, so that's like called meat, right, the main course. I created the Torah as the spice. Wait a second, so that means like the Torah is a spice for the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara is like the main thing? So he says, that's actually true. He says the Yetzer Hara hi ha'ikar, meaning the Yetzer Hara, the raw energy of the Yetzer Hara, is your main tafkid in life. Utilizing that, channeling it, overcoming it, subjugating it, but not destroying it, meaning to be able to take its power of hislavus, that passion that comes from the Yetzer Hara, and to be able to use it in Avodas Hashem. And we know this is necessary, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells how Chazal did a spiritual operation on Am Yisrael, this kind of spiritual amputation, and they removed the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. They removed the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. to the extent that when we read the Svarim in Tanakh and we see Am Yisrael running again and again after Avodah Zarah, we think, were our ancestors idiots? Right? Why did they keep running after Avodah Zarah? Right? The famous Gemara where one of the Chachamim spoke disparagingly about Menashe. Melech Yisrael is a great idolater. And Menashe came to him in a dream. He said, if you had been when I was there, you would have picked up the hem of your robe to run faster after Avodah Zarah. We don't know. But this, obviously, when we lost that energy, so this I heard from Rosh Hashiva, from Baron Schechter, he said, obviously we lost a lot from that operation. It means people used to have a lust for spirituality, for ruchnius, as strong as our most powerful lusts. And we no longer have that. And that's clear from the continuation. Chazal said, okay, we got rid of the Yetzer of Avodah Zarah. There's another Yetzer that caused a lot of trouble in the world. That's the Yetzer for Arayos, for forbidden relations. Let's get rid of that too. And they did. The world came to a stop. A chicken didn't even lay an egg, they said. Nothing. And they had a daven that it be returned. Okay, so that means that energy is there. It must be there to be used. And this is the task of an Adam. He said that his uncle, the Bava Rebbe, used to connect to this Aruch HaChaim. He used to say, when you look at the argument of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Malachim in Masechet Shabbos, when the Malachim are saying to Hashem, why are you giving the Torah to these people, right? To the Hodchal Hashemayim, leave it up here. So Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, Echoz b'kisei kavodi, grab onto my throne, out of them tshuva and answer them. So Moshe Rabbeinu, the famous thing, he says, do you have a mother and father? To do kabiras avicha yasimecha? Do you go down to Mitzrayim to have Pesach? All these things. So he gives a whole list, and he finishes with saying, Klum yetzahara yesh beinechem? Do you have a yetzahara? And then it says, Miyad hodulo. Immediately, then the malachim, right, agreed. It sounds like he says, in the rest of the list, that wasn't the convincing argument. When he said, do you have a yetzahara? They realized that's true. The Torah is there only for people with the yetzahara. The ultimate application of Torah is for people with the yetzahara, right? And the Torah is to guide us into transforming all of that energy to make us like Kalev, Avdei Hashem, with a full heart. Vayimale acharai b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha. Okay, so that's a beautiful way of filling out and fleshing out this idea that we see from Rashi, from the Orach Chaim, and here in Rav Wolfson. Now, as I mentioned, Wolfson wrote this piece. It's really beautiful. It's almost like a symphony. It's very long. It's titled HaMoriah v'HaMachpelah. And it's speaking about the connections and contrasts between Har HaMoriah, right, Har HaBayis, where the Beis HaMikdash is, and Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And again, I'm going to try to pick out a few items from here that'll help us understand Kalev, because he brings it back to why Kalev went to Hebron to daven and not to Yerushalayim. If you're going to go for someplace, ki beisi beis tefillah yikarei l'chol ha'amim, that's Har HaMoriah, that's Har HaBayis. Why did he go to Hebron? It wasn't just, that the Waze told him it was closer to Hebron, there was easier parking, right? There must be a reason particularly why he chose that as opposed to that. So he says like this. He says, Har HaMoriah, Har HaBayis is exactly as we said. It's a mountain. It's where Hashem appears to us in His majesty. As Avraham Avinu said, Bahar Hashem Yeroeh. It's a place that everyone can see, that everyone can go to. It's a makom. And it's a place which was imbued by the power of the Avos, right? Avraham Avinu davened, right? He says that this will be a place, right? Avram Shem HaMakom Ahu Hashem Yeroeh. So it's this place that people can look at and see and identify. Ma'aras HaMachpelah, where the Avos are buried, is very different. It's deep, deep, deep. It's someplace, it's not even really a place, right? It's described not just as a cave, but a cave within a cave. Meaning it's not really in the world of Makom, because it's a place in which the Avos are present in a spiritual sense, even though they're buried there, so to speak. But it's not the living place that they functioned in the world as a makom. Now, he says, when the Avos were alive, each of us was inside of the Avos. I guess kind of like DNA, if we descended from them in DNA, we were in their DNA, so to speak. He says, but now, he says, the Avos are inside of us. Each of us, he says, every person is an olam katan, is a little world. And each of us has our harabayis, our Beis HaMikdash, but each of us also has our Ma'oras HaMachpelah inside. Okay, now, he says, the idea of the Ma'oras HaMachpelah within a person is hidden inside of you. You don't even feel it. You're not even aware of it, but it's there. The Avos are davening with you. That's why we start our Shemona Esrei with Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. But it's hidden in a place that we can't identify, that we can't point to. It's interesting. He brings from a sefer that said that even when Montefiore made the structure over Kever Rachel, there were some tzaddikim that weren't happy with that. He said it wasn't meant to be a structure. Right? I'm sorry, over Ma'oras HaMachpelah, no Kever Rachel. Right? That was it. So now, he tells us the following. So this, what did he say? He said, where did he bring it? It was about, I think, the building. It says, B'Sefer Masos Yushalayim, in the Sefer Masos Yushalayim, he brought that Tzadikim L'chutz L'Aretz, Lo hayanicha daitom mizeh shebona hanediv Moshe Montefiore habinin al Kever Rachel. Shoyse magulu legamri ad shato. That Kever Rachel didn't have that structure over it until then.
Why did you go to there? Also, Esau's head was bad.
Oh, correct. That could be very good also. In other words, in the Ma'oras HaMachpelah is the idea of turning around the bad. Right? Because, as we're going to see now, he says the word Chevron also has the same letters as the word Churban. Okay? Meaning, he says the weakness, so to speak, of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Harabayis, because it is a place, because it is a building, it can be destroyed. But Chevron, which is a lashon of Chibur, is a connection that can never be touched. It's deep, deep down beyond the place that anyone can touch it. Not only can Goyim, so to speak, not touch it or disturb it, we ourselves can't destroy it with our chatoim. Chazal said, even though the schus avos may end, but what's called bris avos, the covenant of the avos, never ends. That's always there. It's untouched. And that's what it represents. So in those times when things get dark, right, and it's a time of churban, so that's a time in which we rely on the connection of Chevron, right, which is there. He even ties it into the idea that says that Yosef went me'emek Chevron, right, from the Eitza Amuka of those who were buried in Chevron, right, of Avram Avinu, that he was told, that Am Yisrael would go down to Mitzrayim. That means Chevron is that which accompanies people, the chibur, the connection which accompanies people in times of Golus. So now back to Kalev. Why did Kalev go there? He says, right, he asked the question, if he needed schus of tefillah, why not go to Yerushalayim? So he says, at the moment that those other Meraglim made their decision to speak ill of Eretz Yisrael, they caused the churban that was going to come centuries later, right? That's the night of Tisha B'Av, was the night of the crying of the Meraglim and the crying that they caused Am Yisrael. Okay, the Bechia L'Doros. And he says there's a principle in halacha, right, that kol omer lisaref k'saruv domi. Something which is destined to be burnt, we view it almost now as if it's burnt. Yeah. So therefore, for the shear like of a lulav or such, so therefore, right, it's as if the Beis HaMikdash at that point was burnt. Right? They set something in motion which was one of destruction. But Kalev knew that there's still a place to go, even if things look hopeless. And that's to go to Chevron. Right? That's to go to that connection that can never be broken. And because that can never be broken, that means that even when things in front of us seem confusing and difficult, we have to stick to that bris and covenant which is there. And here's how he applies it to us, to us as individuals and as a people. He says, "Va'ata achi akore." So he says, you, my brother, who's reading this, and again, there's much, much more in this piece, but I just tried to pick out. He says, "Kfar yadata sheyesh b'cha shnei mikdashim." Now you have learned that you have inside of yourself two holy places, Yerushalayim and Chevron. You have a Yerushalayim inside of yourself, and you have a Chevron. Ki be'ez behirus ve'ora, at a time when you feel clarity and you see light. V'argoshes kirvas elokim ki tov, you feel close to Hashem, you feel Hashem's goodness. Ola atol har Moriah shebetochacha, so then you climb up this internal har HaMoriah that you have inside of you. And then you meet the Avos HaKadoshim, right, who each davened before on that mountain. And you see the beauty of what's there. But sometimes, avol yesh, asher halev nistam, that your heart is blocked. V'amoch sogur u'mesugur, your brain is totally closed. You can't feel anything, you can't understand anything. Hashamayim shalcha miskadrim ba'arpelei ofel, your skies are dark with dark clouds. Choshech techasa einecha, darkness covers your eyes. Ein lecha cheshek l'Torah, you have no desire to learn Torah. Sharei tefillah stumim va'atumim, the gates of your tefillah you feel are totally clogged. Tevakesh eshav nafshecha, so go seek out that which your nefesh loves and wants, but you're not going to find it, right? He says, because you're in such a hard time. So he says, you know what happened? Your Beis HaMikdash was nechrav. You're in a state of churban. And we all cycle through these states. So what do you do then? But matzav kazesh lo tuchal lalos ha-Moriah, at that time you can't go up onto your Har Moriah. Red l'maras ha-Machpelah, go down deep into your internal maras ha-Machpelah, like Kalev ben Yefuneh. He says, throw yourself on the kivrei avos who are buried deep in your heart. Daven with emunah, even though you don't feel anything. You feel no chiyus in it. Learn, even though it tastes bitter to you, instead of a taste of milk and honey. Work like an ox under the yoke and like a donkey carrying a burden. Again, that Avodas of Kalev, meaning it doesn't tell us that he got this clarity by davening at the Maras HaMachpelah and suddenly it was all clear. He says, now I get it. I see Moshe Rabbeinu's right. The Meraglim are wrong. Right? I'm just like Yoshua. It doesn't say that. But it gave him the ability to fight on even if he was confused, even if it was dark, and to use the darker powers inside of himself for the good. He said, because machpeloscha olam lo techarev, your machpelah can never be destroyed. Ma'aroscha olam lo techsar, that cave will never be missing. It's always there for you. V'kayim benafshecha divrei Yeshaya Hanavi, he says, Yeshaya has a pasuk, v'chikisi l'Hashem, and I waited, I anticipated Hashem, a master ponov mi Beis Yaakov, who hides his face from Beis Yaakov, v'kivisi lo, and I had hope for him. He says, hachzek be'amuna yisera, strengthen amuna above and beyond that which you feel capable of. Kave v'yischazek ad shirachmu alecha min hashamayim. Have hope and strengthen yourself until Hashem has mercy on you. Ki lo yiznach l'olam Hashem. Hashem won't let your Beis HaMikdash be destroyed forever. He says, wait, like it says in the pasuk, shomim laboker, like a watchman waits for the morning, right? He says, because that morning will come. But in the meantime, you have the Maras HaMachpelah, right? So that is such a powerful view of what's happening, of what we learned from Kalev, and about that choice of going there. And that was the strength which he was able to siphon. Like the Orach Chaim says, he had that negative spirit in him. It's very hard. You find yourself wanting to go against Moshe Rabbeinu, wanting to go with the Meraglim. He didn't know what to do. He went to daven. He may not have got total clarity, but it gave him the strength to fight, to use the power of the peh, to use the Yetzer Hara's tools for the good, and to be vayimale acharai, to become a complete person. That struggle, that journey, is really how we become complete and who we're supposed to be. May Hashem help us do it, and may we see our Beit HaMikdash built internal and external. Meira.